Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. We got the whole crew with us this week. I'm Jordan Hill. With me this week is Kip Adams and Rusty Manziel. Got the whole group getting ready for what looks like a big week for Georgia as far as recruiting and also getting close to sort of the end of the summer. Let's start with Rusty. Just how's this day treating you as we look at the calendar? Heck, this may be our last podcast in the month of July.
That's crazy how quick things go. In my world, this is allowed until February. The high school scrimmages start next Friday night, which is crazy, August the 5th. And so it's go time. And I'm looking forward to it. Let's sit back and think how fast things go. But here we are again. This is really the last weekend without it. And from here on out, every weekend will be high school football, eventually college, and then NFL starts. So it's a good time of year.
Kip, how about you? How's this Thursday morning treating you?
Treat me pretty well so far. I'm ready, man. I think Georgia having their recruiting cookout and last camp again is big, but I'm pretty excited for fall camp. I think this is going to be really intriguing. Obviously, we've never covered a camp coming off a national championship before, and it's just going to be interesting to see how a lot of these guys handle it. I know fans always want to see kind of the new faces and see what, the incoming class looks like. But for me, it's about, some of the guys coming back after having won it all. How do they handle that? And I just kind of want to see that. And the fact that we're basically a week away from being able to check that out and see how they look is kind of crazy. I think the summer's gone by, maybe a degree or two cooler outside some days, and I just think, ready for the season. It's going to be really interesting to see how this season goes. I think it's just one of those more unpredictable college football seasons in the last couple of years.
No doubt. And yeah, Kip, you get up just early enough outside, you can maybe get a hint of fall weather. It doesn't last long, but you can kind of feel a little bit of that, maybe right around the corner, hopefully sooner rather than later. Well, let's jump in and talk about what's been the big news so far this week as far as recruiting. Georgia picks up its 18th commitment. Yazid Haynes, wide receiver, 3-star from Pennsylvania. That is Georgia's 18th commit in the 2023 class. As of right now, that puts Georgia at 3rd nationally. We've talked a lot, and Rusty, you've hit on it quite a bit, how important receiver was in this class. Just tell us about Yazid Haynes, what you know about him, what stood out, and what it looks like Georgia's getting and adding him to this class.
The first time I heard about him was a couple of months ago. He came down and worked out with some guys in Georgia and started coming down a couple of times a week, actually working out at North Cobb High School, working out at what they call the Bubble in Atlanta with Terrence Edwards and some guys. And they kind of mentioned, hey, this kid from Philly has been coming down and working out. It's a really good player. And, it's kind of out of my footprint, to cover. At that time, didn't have a Georgia offer. So, but I did hear of him, and it says a lot about him to come down here and want to compete with the kids here. When I knew it was serious, I think Temple had a one-day camp, and he was committed to Penn State. And we didn't really put this out here, but I think Fran Brown and Brian McClendon both went up to Philly and attended the Temple camp where he was at and had a chance to watch him work out. Georgia offered him after seeing him working out, and things really got moving pretty quickly after that. We started hearing some noise. I think he was – I would say, well, I guess it kind of was a secret visit. He was in Athens. I don't think it ever got out till a little bit later. Penn State kind of found out about it, and one of those deals. I think Penn State realized that Georgia was a big, obviously, the news kind of this week. Once he decommitted, all roads were leading that he was going to commit to Georgia at any time sooner than later. I thought it probably happened this weekend. Didn't even make it to the weekend. Georgia did their homework there. I've always said one thing, that Brian McClendon is looking to add speed. They're trying to get more speed in that room and work him out. They got a chance to see him in person. They got a chance to visit with him and had him on campus. So I think they felt very comfortable, and I think they're very excited to have him.
6'1", 170. Shout out again to Fran Brown, who has done a good job, especially recruiting around Philly and in the Northeast, some of the guys they've been after. And I think it's kind of, funny. I'm sure this wasn't the way it was necessarily planned. That's 2 Penn State commits that Georgia has flipped now with Joshua Miller, one of the offensive linemen as well. Kip, your thoughts on what you've seen of Haynes, what you think he adds to this class, and just generally where this class sits right now. Like we said, it's almost August, and Georgia has the 3rd overall class in the 2023 cycle.
Yeah, I mean, right now you look at Haynes, and I mean, he is raw. There's a lot he still has to work on, to become a more complete receiver. But at the same time, he brings a lot for Brian McClendon to work with. I think that's kind of what you want to look for when you're trying to add multiple receivers in the class. You want some guys that definitely have some upside, and he's got athleticism, he's got speed. I think that ability to separate and be a threat down the field is something that Georgia continues to look for in its pass catcher room. It's something that, that they really value, but really haven't been able to consistently put on the field. And, look at a guy like Arian Smith. That's a guy that when he's on the field, Georgia's offense looks different. It was one of the most explosive offenses in the country last year, but you add a guy like that in Haynes, and he's a guy who, as a reliable pass catcher, once he becomes that, he adds a dynamic to Georgia's offense that they really need. I think that'll really allow him to elevate his game. So, again, the bottom line is there's a lot to work with, and Brian McClendon has a couple of wideouts in this cycle. We know he wants to add at least 2 more. And so now, he can focus on his other guys. And, whether that's Hakeem Williams from Stranahan and Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or Anthony Edwards in Texas, or a guy that's visiting this weekend in Tyler Williams. He can now kind of, hone his focus in and try to build that first wide receivers class. He's able to land at least 2 of the 3 of those guys. That's an outstanding first wide receiver class. And Rusty's mentioned it before. I mean, the wide receiver numbers, it's been used against him this cycle, not putting up huge numbers. And yet Brian McClendon has a chance to really build a strong wide receiver group. It's just about kind of, closing the deal on a couple of those guys, but he's got the foundation, and now he's able to work on those top targets to try to finish out that wide receiver class.
Haynes becomes the 2nd receiver commit along with Raymond Cottrell. We talked about this weekend, and let's jump into that a little bit. With the cookout coming up, we've seen several different players, recruits, I should say, announcing they're going to be in Athens and going to be back this weekend. I'll start with you, Rusty. Just what is the importance of this upcoming weekend with some of these prospects coming back to Athens, and just sort of what you expect to see and hear out of what Georgia does this weekend?
Well, you're coming off basically a 6-week dead period, ending up June, that last week of June, and you get the 4 weeks of July. So you kind of, and then all of a sudden you go back to dead week in August, and then Georgia opens up with Oregon. So they're not going to host there. So it's going to be, 2nd week in September before they're able to host prospects again. So you're looking at another 6-7 weeks. So it's important to kind of, put your best foot forward, so to speak, again. You got these guys on campus. It kind of, it's the end of the summer, kind of to get some momentum there. A guy I look at, Monroe Freeling, who is at Alabama, I believe, today, and comes over tomorrow and spends Friday and Saturday at Georgia. It's offensive tackle out of Charleston. Huge target for Georgia. 6'7" prospect. I think top 100 across the board, no matter what service you're looking at. And to have a guy like that on campus for 2 days with his family again is extremely important. So, they're going to have some key guys, but it's not really an official visit type weekend. These are the 1-day deals. Will come in, spend some time. They got a lot of 24s on campus this weekend. They'll have some guys. Jaden Davis, one of the top quarterbacks in the country for the 2024 class out of the Charlotte area. He'll be back on campus tomorrow. Then he takes a visit up to Michigan. I was at Buford last night watching practice, and KJ Bolden, 5-star, number 1 rated athlete in the country for 2024. King Joseph, also a defensive end there from Buford. I was interested. I was talking to those guys. I said, by the way, they had 5 days of practice this week. I said, what's your plans for this weekend? And they were like, yeah, we're going to Georgia Friday, and then we're going to Michigan State Saturday. And I was like, that kind of tells you where we are in this world of recruiting. they're going to those 3 schools in basically 36 hours. So you look at those types of things, it's kind of a last hoorah to end the summer cycle. I'm not expecting a ton of news, but this is kind of one of those weekends where you really make some hay, and it may pay off down into the fall.
Kip, any additional thoughts just on this weekend, what we might see, what we might hear when it's all said and done?
Like I mentioned, with Tyler Williams out of Lakeland High School, as of now, he plans to announce in September, I believe, September 27th, and he's already taken 4 official visits. Georgia got him on campus June 10th. And get him on campus one more time. You're not sure how many more times you're going to get him on campus before he visits. Obviously maybe a game there in September for Georgia would probably be something they would try to work on. But, you got Texas A&M in there fighting. Obviously Clemson and South Carolina got him on campus as well. That's a top wide receiver target that, might be a little underrated by the recruiting services. Just a guy that's 6'3", 180 pounds that can kind of do it all at the wide receiver position. I think he's played quarterback earlier in his prep career, and now full-time wide receiver, legit basketball prospect as well. That's just one of those guys that you really want to have for Georgia. And if we're talking about just top guys visiting this week, you could argue that the top guys already visited this week, and that's Jordan Hall out of Jacksonville, Florida, in Athens earlier this week. And he's a guy that 6'5", 300 pounds. Rusty's already, stood on the table for him as a guy that could be, the number 1 defensive lineman in this class when all is said and done. And that's a guy Georgia's been in on throughout the cycle. We've mentioned him multiple times on the podcast. He's a huge target, but his recruitment doesn't seem like it's, close to being over at all. Hasn't taken any official visits, probably going to go all the way till signing day. One of those guys that, may not even take official visits during the season, but getting him on campus again, that's good news for Jordan anytime you can do that. And that's definitely a guy that Trey Scott wants to have in this class because the talent is there. That 84-inch wingspan, almost 11-inch hands. He has all the measurements you're looking for on the defensive line. And Georgia's obviously got some spots to fill there at that position in this class.
We're going to take a break here in a second and come back and talk about fall camp starting next week. But I want to make sure, shout out to everybody who's watching us on Facebook Live right now. I want to recommend everybody watching, make sure to go to YouTube, subscribe to the Dogs 247 channel. If you look in our comments, there is a link where you can go and do that. So again, appreciate you guys watching and tuning in. So we'll go to a break and come back and talk about what's going to be a big week next week with fall camp getting underway. Welcome back, everybody. Well, yeah, next a week from today, we will be right around noon. We're going to have a chance to talk to Kirby Smart. Some of the players are going to report on Wednesday, and then Thursday, August 4th, is going to be the start of fall camp for Georgia. Going to be a little bit less than a month before Georgia takes on Oregon in Atlanta to kick off the 2022 season. I want to start with you, Kip, with what we have coming up with fall camp. What intrigues you the most, whether it's a player or a storyline or anything of that matter, when it comes to this fall camp? What you're looking for, or what really intrigues you the most?
I want to see where Taylor Ratledge is, where he is in his rehab and his return to play, because that was a guy that was expected to, start of the season and, tough injury right there, right at the beginning of the season. And he was a guy that, again, had impressed everyone in fall camp, kind of ran away with the job there, and was expected to really be a star at that guard position. And now you're kind of looking to see what you got at left guard and right guard. And I think, that's going to be the first question. Where's Tate Ratledge? That's probably going to have a lot to say with, what the pecking order at those guard positions. No, it's not maybe, the most glamorous position when we're talking about things we're looking for fall camp, but I think it's going to be really important for Georgia that offensive line. You know what you got at the tackle position. You know what you got at center. You really want to see what you have at the guard position. They're probably going to have lots of different lineups they're going to try out there. And I think it all begins with Tate. And if he's able to, return from that injury and get back, close to where he was last year, then I think Georgia is going to have a really, really strong offensive line. They already do, but I think, this could be one of the better offensive lines in the country if he's the guy that can get back in there and get back to that form that he showed early on last season.
Yeah, I had a chance to write a story about Tate this morning, going back from last week, media days. Cedric Van Pran had a lot of good things to say about what he's seen. I think he called him a freak of nature, just how he's come back from what, we've talked about, I think, on this podcast a few times, was a really difficult injury. And Kip, you hit on Tate, and to me, the two people I really want to watch are Tate Ratledge, like you just said, went into detail about him, and Tyke Smith. I mean, that was a guy that when Georgia got him last year, it was a big deal. He had gotten a few All-American honors, I think Pro Football Focus rivals as well, while he was at West Virginia in 2020, and just, really couldn't stay healthy last year, had a foot injury that slowed him down to start the year, plays against Auburn, then winds up tearing his ACL after that. He's a guy that I feel like if he's healthy, really factors into that safety spot that's open after losing Lewis Seen. So I think it's a big opportunity with Tyke coming back. And those are two guys that if they're healthy and if they're able to go this fall, I think they really could wind up being starters when we get to that Oregon game. Rusty, I'll throw it to you as far as fall camp. What are you looking for? What kind of stands out to you as things you want to see over these practices as we get closer and closer to September 3rd?
Well, you obviously want to see – I want to see Kendall Milton. We obviously know he was a highly recruited player coming out of high school, and he's kind of waited his turn. He's been a little bit banged up at times at Georgia. And, I was watching a little bit of something on SEC Network last night, and it was a 60-minute show on Georgia. And he made a couple of runs last year, and you kind of forget, like, hey, this guy's got a little more wiggle than you think in a big body type player. So, how is Kendall Milton? Can he hold up? Can he stay healthy? And how, how valuable would he be? Obviously, Georgia's going to count on him a lot coming in this season, losing James Cook and Zamir White. And, I think a guy that I think coming back for this year, I think Kearis Jackson. I think he has a lot more, I think, potential than he has been shown, and I think he's going to get more touches. This is a guy that's a captain. This is a senior guy that's kind of a leader in this locker room as well, and he can run. He's got some ball skills, and it kind of reminded me last night that catch he made against Florida late in the first half. We put his foot down, body control, those types of things. So I think Kearis Jackson not only can block because he's strong. The kid was a 100-meter state champ. I think he was a shot put state champ. You don't see that too much in a skill player wide receiver coming out of Peach County. So I think Kearis Jackson's a guy that is probably going to take a bigger step than people really might be talking about. And Kendall Milton, two I would say veterans that I think are going to take steps forward for this Georgia on the offensive side of the ball.
I really like you pointing out Kearis because I think back to the spring, he had a good G-Day, and we talked to him afterwards. And it just really struck me. I mean, he was very honest and feeling like, I think the quote he gave us was, I have not been the Kearis Jackson I can be while at Georgia. He's had moments. He was, I think, one of the leading receivers in 2020 and then dealt with injuries, had that surgery before last season. So I think that's a good pick. I mean, I think he's a guy with a lot of potential. And again, in a receiver room that I feel like they've got a lot of options. It's just not quite clear enough yet who is going to emerge. I think Kearis is a great pick there.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think of who else we should kind of hit on. And the thing that I was struck by, and Rusty, if you want to talk a little bit about this, a note you had on one of the freshmen, Michael Williams, who obviously was a big deal when he signed, obviously a 5-star. Just what have you heard about him? What has sort of stood out as he is among those freshmen that we're going to keep a really close eye on once we get into camp?
Just high effort guy, high energy, already kind of, now it's kind of, it's player led stuff in the summer. So you really have to kind of gather intel, what you can do. But, here's a guy that everybody compared to Trayvon Walker. And I kind of wanted I never really want to do that, but it was really hard not to, man, with his frame and athleticism. Now, I'm not saying that Michael Williams is going to be a first rounder, but I spent a week with him in Texas, and I'm telling you right now, he may have been the best player in Texas, the All-American Bowl, and he was hell on wheels every single day, and he was more explosive than I thought he was, and being able to rush the passer with your hand down from a 5 technique, you see how valuable that is, because Trayvon Walker just got almost $40 million for being able to do that. So, can Michael start early? He probably won't start, but can he help Georgia? Yes, he can. And, it took Jordan Davis basically to that Florida game past that bye week in his freshman year to really find his role and to help Georgia that second half of his freshman year. I think Michael Williams is going to play some, but this second half of his freshman year, if he stays healthy, I can definitely see Michael Williams playing what I call meaningful minutes and helping Georgia. And I think he is going to live up to every bit of the hype he's got before his Georgia career is over. I think Michael Williams, the sky is unlimited for him right now.
Yeah, it really struck me. I think it was the very first day of spring practice that Kirby was asked about Michael. And, Kirby made it a point to say, he doesn't have to be Trayvon Walker because, again, that's the comparison he gets with what he brings to the table. But, heard nothing but good things from Coach Smart as well as the players of how Michael handled the spring. And obviously he's a guy that, again, at that defensive end position, if that's where they wind up putting him, it seems like he's got an opportunity, like you said, to play meaningful minutes once we get into the season. Before we wrap this up and we can kind of each go along with this, just what do you think is the biggest objective for Georgia going into this fall camp and where they want to be as they get ready for September 3rd? I'll kind of just start and just say generally it's just seeing guys step up. We heard a lot about Jamon Dumas-Johnson, a little bit about Kamari Lassiter, some of those guys that are going to be expected to play these big roles. Obviously, there's 2 competitions, at least maybe even 3 if you count both guard spots, that we feel like are really still going on and are truly up for grabs going into fall camp. But, I want to hear more from some of these veterans like a Nolan Smith, even Stetson Bennett at quarterback, what they're seeing from these younger guys, these guys that are expected to step up into bigger roles. To me, I think that's the biggest thing I want to get as far as hearing from the players, hearing from Coach Smart, as far as what we get out of fall camp. Kip, what are you looking for? What are you wanting to hear by the time this fall camp has ended, by the time these practices are in the books, and by the time we're headed to Atlanta to go cover another season opener?
Looking forward to hearing absolutely nothing about the quarterback battle. I'm looking forward to hearing that Stetson is clearly the best quarterback on the roster and the quarterback that is best prepared to lead Georgia back to the college football playoff. I think, that's that narrative that gets thrown around. Everyone's wanting to see when, Gunnar Stockton's going to get in the game, when Brock Vandagriff's going to get in the game. Is this the year Carson Beck takes the next step? Maybe this is the year that, Stetson Bennett takes the next step. And we've said that all offseason about this being the first time he's QB1 heading into the offseason, the first time he's had the whole offseason to be QB1 with Todd Monken. What does that mean? What does that mean for Todd Monken? What does that offense look like when you know who your starting quarterback is going to be? You don't have to adjust. You don't have to adapt to a different guy starting when the season began. Stetson is your guy. Show us what that means. And for Stetson, again, his storyline continues to be echoed over and over again about silencing doubters and being counted out, not being a top 5 quarterback when we're at the SEC media days. This is his opportunity. He doesn't have to necessarily worry about the other quarterbacks on the roster, but at the same time, we saw in 2019 when Jake Fromm didn't have to worry about that, it wasn't exactly his best season either. Can Stetson Bennett handle that? Not knowing that it's not necessarily a competition, even though Kirby Smart will tell you guys next week that he's got a competition. He's got to earn the starting job. But at the same time, if he knows there's not someone directly over his shoulder pushing him for QB1, is he going to continue to push himself to become a better quarterback in fall camp? Because they're going to need him to be a better quarterback this season. Everyone says it. They're going to ask more of Stetson Bennett this season. He's going to have to, not throw 14 passes a game, most likely to, maybe not necessarily for Georgia to get to the back to Atlanta, but for Georgia to return to the college football playoff and be a legitimate contender, he's probably going to have to do more than he did last season. So that's something you want to see some strides in fall camp. You want to see, is the offense, able to, get some wins against that defense? Because, usually defense is ahead when fall camp starts, but, they got a lot of weapons on offense. They got a lot of guys returning back. So is this going to be that offense, not that fans are looking for, but necessarily just an offense that throws 40 times a game, but an offense that you clearly know Stetson Bennett is the leader of this offense, not just a game manager, but a guy that makes plays with his legs, but also with his arm.
Yeah, I wish while we were in Atlanta for media days, I had $1 for every time Stetson was asked about, silencing the critics or, being overlooked. Because, man, when they were in that scrum and people were around him, I feel like that was every other question. And kudos to Stetson, because I truly feel like he handled it better than I would have sitting there in that seat. Before we get out of here, Rusty, any additional thoughts on fall camp? Anything you want to see? Any just parting shots when it comes to this camp coming up?
Let me say, first off, completely agree with Kip there on the quarterback spot. So you want Stetson Bennett to be the guy. Now, on the flip side of that, the quarterback, I want to see if Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff can separate. So my thought is fall camp is the time to get reps, because can Carson Beck solidify the number 2 spot? Will Brock Vandagriff make us move right here in these scrimmages? Because we all know once you get into the season, everything gets cut down. Number 3 barely gets any reps. And in fact, you heard Stetson Bennett talk about at the end of fall camp last year, he went to Todd Monken and said, look, I'm not getting any reps. Well, he was number 3 at the end of fall camp, and we kind of know how that thing played out. But, you assume this is Stetson Bennett's team, and he's going to take that step, and he should take that step. He's been through every situation now. I want to see, can Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff, can either one of those guys separate from each other, and can somebody take the clear hold of number 2? Because there's going to be some decisions to make in December. I mean, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to start a rumor, my opinion, somebody's going to make a decision in December. Like, hey, I know I'm 3 and this guy's been 2 for a while, or I beat this guy out. Maybe maybe it's not the spot for me. So I want to see if who kind of comes out of fall camp and kind of who's the guy right now behind Stetson Bennett. So you want to think that Stetson Bennett's the guy, but on the other half, can somebody make a move? And where is Gunnar Stockton in all this after he's had a pretty good summer? And I made that note the other day on the message board, but right now he's still clearly behind these 2 guys who have a good head start on him. But, where is the quarterback play? Who is going to separate? Who is going to be that number 2 guy at the end of about 4 weeks of practice? And how does that carry over into the season? And what does that mean in December?
Yeah, that's the nature of playing quarterback now, as far as there's going to be a carousel, and at some point, it's going to stop and someone's going to decide that they may want to go elsewhere. That's just sort of what quarterback is in 2022. So on that note, we're going to wrap this thing up. Appreciate Rusty and Kip popping on with us. I appreciate everybody watching. Appreciate all you guys watching on Facebook. Again, be sure to go subscribe to the Dogs 247 YouTube channel. There's a link there in the comments if you want to take a look at that. But we'll get out of here on that. Appreciate everybody watching. Be sure to keep an eye out, because fall camp's right around the corner. I know all 3 of us have all kinds of stories and content coming down the pipe, and we'll get you guys ready for camp, because it's going to be here before you know it. So we'll get out of here on that. Appreciate everybody watching. Until next time, take care.